The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Top of the day. I'm Joe Doolittle.
And I'm Kate Dudding.
And this is Story by Story.
Celebrating the human spirit.
With an emphasis on celebration because, spring has finally arrived.
I saw a tree and it had little red things at the ends of all of its branches. I think they're leaves.
They're leaves.
Baby
I remember
leaves.
I remember leaves. Except, you know why I remember leaves? Because I've got this oak tree in my front yard, and it clings to its leaves until, right about now. They just left, and now the new ones are popping out. So, we are storytellers, and at times we effervesce a lot. And we're going to try to bubble up some wonderful conversations first about storytelling as an art, as a method. And then we're going to have some guest storytellers here. But, Kate, I always like to find out what you've been doing, around storytelling. So, kind of what's the most interesting thing that you've been into lately?
Well, I was one of the people chosen to speak at a League of Women Voters event held at Cafe Lena.
Oh.
It was the LED talk. League embraces democracy.
You can raise it.
And I shared my story about First Lieutenant Mohsen Naqvi, who was a Muslim American who joined the Army Reserve 4 days after 9/11 because it was the only way he had to show how much he loved this country. He had been born in Pakistan but came to this country when he was 8. And then he went on to have a career in the Army. And then, unfortunately, he was killed when he was 26, 3 months after he married, when he was on a tour in Afghanistan. And it was very well received that it was a packed house.
I bet.
And when I showed his picture at the end, it was very moving.
Boy, when I asked you about interesting, you sure do get into interesting, Kate.
I try.
And this young man, he grew up around here.
He grew up in Newburgh area.
Okay.
But his wife came from this area, and so he was married from a mosque in Colonie, and he was buried. The service was at that same mosque, and then in Evergreen Cemetery on Route 5 in Colonie.
Wow. When you ask a question, sometimes you're surprised or in awe of the response. And one of the remarkable things about story is that it can cause that awe to happen. And so stay tuned, because we'll get into a little bit more on method. And we've got some guests here that can help you.
What about you? Did you do anything interesting that you can share with our guests?
Well, I didn't have to post bail. That was
well, yeah. Yeah, you didn't call me.
I didn't call you. This month. Probably the most interesting thing, I've never done it before, was that there's a big regional conference at the Northeast Storytelling, and they have a paneled oleo performance, and I was accepted. And I got to tell one of my favorite stories to a room full of my friends, and it was just a real good feel.
Yes.
And it's the story about the only time I've ever called my father by his first name, which is Alden, which is also my real first name. Joe is a family nickname. And it just fit. It was wonderful.
You did. You were on top of your game there.
Yeah, I got. At any rate, so and the nice thing about that, this is kind of a heads up, is that same conference, Sharing the Fire, will be in Saratoga next year. It was in Plymouth, Massachusetts this year, so it's going to be around, and there's going to be a lot of really great storytelling in the area on that weekend.
There'll be a number of concerts the public will be able to attend at the Gideon Putnam.
We are very proud today to have our guest Jerry Bernsen and Barry Marshall with us, because they are renowned storytellers internationally, nationally. The last time I saw Jerry, I actually took her picture because she was on the stage at the National Storytelling Conference accepting a Circle of Excellence Award, which they don't give out to many people, for the Storycrafters, Barry and Jerry. And Barry couldn't make the trip to Kansas City, so the picture is of Jerry Burns, one of our guests, and her holding up a kind of fan panel of a picture of Barry. And the whole place went kind of calyptic when she held up Barry's picture. So with that kind of introduction, we ought to just bring them in, don't you think?
Both in real life.
Both in real life, and right here. And this is not a picture on a panel. This is the real Barry right here.
Well, sometimes.
Oh, sorry. And you guys live down in Columbia County.
We do.
We do.
And you've been there forever.
We live in 2 towns in Columbia County.
You live in 2 towns?
Exactly.
We do. We live in Philmont and we live in Hudson.
It's very exciting.
You live in Philmont, but they aren't even close together.
You ready? When we moved to Philmont, there was no mail delivery in Philmont. So everyone had a P.O. box in Philmont, which everyone paid for in Philmont. And that went over fine, except every now and then someone would bring up the fact that, well, actually, everyone's supposed to have free mail delivery, aren't they? And the folks in the post office would say, yes, well, we don't really know what to do about it, and we're not really sure, so everyone just continued paying their post office box. And that was fine, because it was sort of the central social place of Philmont, to go to the post office every day and get your mail and see everybody and so forth. Well, at some point, somebody pushed it far enough up the chain, someone got annoyed enough that they had to pay for their P.O. box, that they went to all the way to White Plains and spoke to the folks there and said, we shouldn't have to pay for a P.O. box. So the post office did this little research project by checking to see if Hudson would deliver mail to Philmont, expecting Hudson to say no, and then Philmont could say, okay, well, then we'll give everybody a free P.O. box. Hudson said, yes, we'll deliver mail to Philmont. So the decision in Philmont was that if you lived within a quarter mile of the post office in Philmont, you could have a free P.O. box. Everyone further away than a quarter mile could either pay for their P.O. box or get mail delivery from Hudson. We chose to get mail delivery from Hudson, so now we live in Philmont and Hudson. Get it?
Not to mention your library district and...
Oh yeah, it's very exciting.
So you have an address that says that you live in Hudson, but the mail gets delivered to Philmont.
And it's interesting when people say, where do you live? It's a real decision.
Well, I lived in Clifton Park, but my mailing address was Ballston Lake.
There you go.
And my school system was Shenandoah, and
You see?
Yeah.
So you had a lakefront address in a park.
yeah. I was only 12 miles away, but
there's a big thing in the Native American storytelling experience that talks a lot about place.
Sure.
So you could tell the story about place, except with you guys it's plural.
Right.
I mean, you can work that one up.
Oh, absolutely.
Sort of been displaced without moving or something. Anyways, but you are actually storytellers, and Barry is my producer of the 5 CDs that I've created.
And fine they are.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, they really are good CDs.
Just to give our audience a little bit of background, you've been storytelling for a while.
But we're still teenagers. Well, at least I am.
Yes. Some people don't grow up. Thank you, Peter Pan's sister. Yes.
Yes, that's me.
Okay.
Peter Rena or something.
When did storytelling start for you? I mean, can you just share? Because I think it's important for the audience to kind of understand when people begin to see themselves as a storyteller and not just a conversationalist or something like that.
Gotcha.
I tripped over it in college. So it was 1985 when I just sort of walked into a room and we were told we were going to tell stories as part of a class that I was taking. And I tried it and said, that's it. I'm set. So I just kept doing it from there. And then we met in 91. I was already working at it, getting my feet deeper and deeper in the water slowly over those 6 years. And then we met in 91 and
Yeah, and I kind of backed into it by accident. I was teaching grad school, and in the course of getting my PhD, and in social welfare.
Yeah.
And they put me into teaching a research methods class for social work students who were very upset about the idea of taking a research methods class and sitting there, and it was a 3-hour class once a week. So it was, and they were very upset. And so one of the things I just started to do from a pedagogical perspective was use stories. I would like make up a story that fit the week's lesson, and then so I was doing that. That's how I was approaching teaching, as I was using stories. And then when we met and we put the storytelling together, it was natural. It wasn't like I was brand new at it, because we all have our brand new things that we do, because when we're getting conscious, okay, now I am being a storyteller, sometimes we that consciousness of wearing the hat of storyteller can impede our initial foray into it, because we're thinking, okay, now I'm a storyteller and I have to do this stuff. Well, I didn't have that.
Jerry just kind of high-speeded her way through the first steps of it and got very quickly up to a certain point. And I was like, boy, you did that fast.
And we didn't understand why until we realized that I had been doing it, but it was unconscious, which is really how I do a lot of things in the world.
Well, actually, Sandy
that
Schumann.
unconscious PhD of yours, it's always been that way. Yeah.
Okay, now we've just gone past, and Sandy Schumann had a very same thing, not being unconscious, but that he is a facilitator, and
Yeah, that's right.
And he gets evaluations, and one evaluation said, what I liked best about this was the stories Sandy told. I told stories, and then he, oh, yes, to illustrate my points, or
Exactly.
And so he sort of backed into it and was experienced in it before he knew he was doing it.
Exactly, and that's a fun thing, and that's what happened to us. And then we started doing it together, which is a little bit different, of having the two voices. It's like living in two towns at the same time, telling the story, but two voices.
Which took us about, I'm trying to remember when we first tried doing a story together, how long it took us to try that.
Our first story that we told, and we remember the story.
Well, I remember the story, but I remember how long it took us, because at first you were just doing some solo stuff, and I was doing some solo stuff, and then we tried one.
It was in the
took
fall.
Off.
It was like, because we got together in the summer, right? And
Yeah.
then it was sometime in that fall.
Yeah, it was within a few months.
It was like a couple months or something.
And then it very quickly took off, and we said, okay, well, I guess this is what we're going to do. And so we just kept doing that, and that's pretty much what we've done ever since.
Because the first time we told a story where there was a public, we were working on a farm and together, and doing like environmental education and farm stuff, and nature stuff with children, and we would tell stories there periodically. And look, every time a school class came, we would have a story night. And so the first time we did a tandem story or a duo story with the two voices, one of the teachers right there said, we're going to hire you to come to our school. We have this event, boom, 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 boom. And it was the first time we ever did it. And so it made us say, oh, there might be something to this.
And what story was it?
It is a folktale and a picture book, both. Ashley Bryan did a version of this
Jamaican folktale, right?
It wasn't Jamaican. It was Caribbean. I don't remember. It wasn't Jamaican though, but a Caribbean folktale. And at other times, I do remember when it is. It's just not coming to me right now. Anyway, and so we told that story. It's a short little story, and Ashley Bryan's given us permission to tell it in different contexts, even though we don't tell it exactly as he did it, and that's okay with him. What he told us is, if we tell the story, that we should, just say that we're inspired by him, because we feel like it's an inspiration by the folktale, Ashley Bryan, and our own retelling of it.
But we can't tell it on air because we don't have permission to do any recording.
That's fine. That's fine.
A couple of just points that have gone by are kind of rapid fire. One, there's an intentionality about a story for a storyteller. You're going to carry a message, and you're going to entertain people and teach them. So there's some purpose. It isn't casual, even though great storytellers like Barry and Jerry make it appear kind of informal.
Just like ballerinas don't sweat, even though their toes are bleeding.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Our toes never bleed.
So just think about that's part of the method of having some intentionality about the story, whether it's a personal one or an old folktale. And then that the stories rest with an owner. In the public domain, they may be not have to be gifted because they've been around like the hare and the tortoise forever, but some are crafted and are copywritten or culturally sensitive.
Right.
And you need to get permission before you kind of say, I'm going to do a program at a library or at a convention, and I'd like to tell your story. So there's a bit of background there I just thought we'd share.
Cool. Now, before we ask you to tell a story, you have a new book out,
Oh, yes.
Story Twisting, a guide to remixing and reinventing stories.
Well done.
Well done.
That's the Twitter feed.
Yes. And so, what's that all about? And then please give us an example.
You should take on what it's about because you did the lion's share of that.
Okay, what story twisting is about? We talk about telling a story or retelling a story, taking a story that like the tortoise and the hare, for example, and we can tell it like we've heard it. In using our own words and our own, imprint, because everybody imprints a story with their own personality and interpretation, and that's what but the story is still going to sound roughly the same if you tell it or you tell it or I tell it, approximately, with the differences that there'll be Kate-isms and Joe-isms and so forth. One of the that's like a way of retelling. What story twisting does is it's a thing that we've developed this whole technique of taking a story that everybody knows, but flipping it on its side a little bit, changing something more than certain language to tell the story, flipping gender, flipping settings, flipping certain kinds of meaning in certain situations, and so it's taking the stuff that's familiar and reinventing it to a modern time, into a different context, or just to freshen it up, or just because it's so fun and we want to see if it pairs here. So sometimes what we do with the stories, it's meant to be playful, and sometimes it's meant to make a social statement. And sometimes in the course of being playful, social statements get made about the times that we live in versus the times that the stories were gathered. And so it's also a way of just using creativity and sinking back and enjoying the creative flow with stories. Is that summarize it?
Absolutely, yeah. And but not ignoring traditions, not saying we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater and redo everything and not just ignore the old stories. The old stories have a lot of value to them, and so what we have to do is you have to cull through them to say, okay, what are the values that we really want to bring forward from these old stories, and what are the values that we want to leave behind,
right.
and then still make use of them because they're great stories.
Right, and that they only exist because each generation told them.
Right.
And thought they were important.
But not feel like they have to be word for word and image for image the way they were done in 1892. We're now in 2019. There are some different things going on. So how do we take those same sets of images and move them forward?
In some ways, many Shakespearean productions, they change the costumes to different periods of time.
Right.
That we're going to see a production, my family and I are going to see a production of The Merry Wives of Windsor that they're setting in the 1950s, where women were put in little pretty boxes and with pearls and hose and heels.
So the same story can make several different statements based on the clothing that it's wearing. When we used to teach a program at Southern Connecticut State University, and we were teaching a graduate program in the oral tradition, and we were working with children's librarians and school librarians and teachers about integrating storytelling into the classroom and into the school library and into the public library. And one of the things that we did, there were several courses that we taught, but one was really a focus on the fairy tale. And we did a lot of looking at different ways of presenting classic fairy tale stories. And there was one day when we were really focused on Cinderella. And it was a whole day focused on Cinderella. And amongst other things that we did, we had 3 film versions of Cinderella that had all been done over a time period from 1950s to the 1990s. And we looked at certain scenes in each of these 3 versions of Cinderella to see what they did differently in each one to make slightly different statements using the same story. And it was really interesting to see. And it was sometimes it was just as simple as the way one character reacted to a certain situation that really made a different statement about that character and about how you can live your life. And it was very, very subtle, but it was really interesting to see head to head these different ways of going about the same thing.
And so the book touches on that kind of thing. There's a lot of pieces to this book because it's got sample stories in it, but it gives the process that we go through, but it also touches upon ethical issues, and it really dives deep down into that for a book of this size. It's deep, but
Having done a dissertation, you understand how deep one can get.
An inch deep.
Yes. But yeah. So we get down. There's one essay that talks about what happens when you focus in on one single word. A single word, and how you can sit and agonize over a single word. It's my specialty, agonizing over like a single word, like, but and how important it can be in the choice, in the meaning, in what you're bringing, and so that. Yeah, so that's what this book is. It's offering an alternative way of keeping old stories going, and also it's opening it helps us keep aware of things that we need to think about in general when we're telling any stories. So it's creative writing, it's thinking, it's story example, it's a lot of things.
So you've given us the framework. Can you give us a real live example, please? Because I always learn more from an example, and then the verbiage makes more sense.
Surely, of course.
Okay.
Which example do you think?
Well, let's start off playfully. Let's do. So one of the things that we do in the book is divided into taking a look at many different aspects of a story and different ways you can change them. And one of the things that we see what happens is if we take a story. Since Terry was talking about agonizing over one word, sometimes we'll take a story that everybody knows and then either change one word in the story or even a letter of one word in the story and then see what comes out of it. So here's an example of that. So you know the story of the 3 bears.
Yes.
So instead of telling you the story of the 3 bears, that was perfect. Instead of telling you the story of the 3 bears, what we'll do is we'll tell you the story of the 3 pears.
Well, there was
Papa Pear.
And there was Mama Pear.
And she was, of course, the boss.
And there was wee baby bite-sized pear.
This is right down your aisle, Kate. I love it. So now, at the beginning of the story, Mama Pear was making breakfast for the family. And because you're familiar with the story, you know that she was making
porridge.
Right, except that in this case it was parage.
And Baby Pear was hungry. Baby Pear loved Mama Pear's porridge, and so Baby Pear climbed up on the table, and he started to roll over the table toward the porridge at the other side.
But Mama Pear knew that was a disaster in waiting, so she said, "Baby Pear, be careful, that porridge is very hot, you're going to poach yourself again."
Now, Baby Pear was like a toddler, was always getting into things, and he was having accidents. Mama and Papa Pear had to call the paramedics nearly every single day.
So Mama Pear said, "Just stop." She proposed that they go for a little wobble out in the orchard. Well, the 3 of them left the house and they went for their wobble, but while they were gone, someone else came along, and because you know the story, you know that it was
Goldilocks.
Right, except that in this case it was Golden Delicious.
Golden Delicious.
Yes. And Golden Delicious smelled the aroma of the porridge on the breeze, and she said, "Oh, this must be paradise."
She was not a bad apple. She was just a little saucy.
And so she pushed open the door, and she went straight in.
And the first thing she saw
was the porridge on the table. She tasted the porridge in the great big bowl.
But it was too hot.
And then she tried the porridge in the middle-sized bowl.
And it was too cold.
And then she tried the porridge in the tiniest bowl.
And it was just right.
Yeah, she's groaning. You're groaning.
I'll hold the microphones up to get that.
And then she decided to sit down. She sat down in the great big chair.
But it was too hard.
And then she sat down in the middle-sized chair.
But it was too soft.
And then she sat down in the tiniest chair.
And it was, say it with us.
Just right.
Good.
But Golden Delicious was one juicy apple, and Baby Bite-Sized Pear was tiny. The chair was very small, and it just couldn't hold her. And before long, Golden Delicious smashed that chair to bits. And now she was really good down to her core, so she wanted to repair the chair. So she looked around the house for some plaster of Paris.
But that was a fruitless search.
So exhausted from her efforts, Golden Delicious went upstairs to look for a bed to rest in.
She didn't find a bed. She found a pear tree.
So she tested the great big branch.
But it was too hard.
And she went up to the middle-sized branch.
But it was too soft.
And then she went up to the topmost branch.
And it was
just right. So Golden Delicious curled up with Baby Pear stuffed partridge, or stuffed partridge, and went to sleep for the night.
Now, no sooner had she gone to sleep up there than the three pears came home from their wobble. But when they got home, very good, kid. I like that wobble. That was good. When they got home from the wobble, they saw that the front door was open.
And Mama Pear was very upset. Oh, heavens preserve us! The door's ajar!
But Papa Pear said, "Oh, honey, you're just being paranoid again." And they went inside.
They were quite a pair.
They were, in fact, and they looked at the bowls of porridge. And Papa Pear said,
"Someone's been eating my porridge."
And Mama Pear said, "Someone's been eating my porridge."
And Baby Pear said, "Someone's been eating my porridge, and now it's eaten all up."
And then they went and looked at the chairs.
"Someone's been sitting in my chair."
And someone's been sitting in my chair.
"Someone's been sitting in my chair, and now it's smashed to bits."
And then they went upstairs and they looked in the tree.
"Someone's been sleeping on my branch."
And someone's been sleeping on my branch.
"Someone's been sleeping on my branch." And there she is!
So they reached up to pluck Golden Delicious from the tree.
But Golden Delicious dropped from the tree, rolled out of the room, down the stairs, and out of the house.
Now, if this was the story of the three bears, that would be the end of the story. But this is not the story of the three bears. This is the story of the three
pears.
Right. So the next morning, Golden Delicious woke up at home and she remembered that delicious porridge.
It was unparalleled.
She really wanted to have some more.
Nothing compared to it.
So she went back to the house of the three pears. She had breakfast with them. They were there this time. And after breakfast, she stayed and she played with Baby Bite-Sized Pear.
And it so happened that on that day, Baby Bite-Sized Pear had no accidents.
So the next day she came again and she had breakfast with the family and she played with Baby Bite-Sized Pear.
And once again, Baby Bite-Sized Pear had no accidents.
So she came there every single day. She had breakfast and she played with Baby Bite-Sized Pear, and Baby Bite-Sized Pear was fine, and so the decision was made that Golden Delicious should become Baby Bite-Sized Pear's
au pair. And so the family never had to call the paramedics again.
All of which goes to show you that an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
Oh!
And that's exactly the reaction we get from any audience that we tell the story.
Usually audience will applaud after a
No
story.
applaud.
That's
The groan is always part of it.
yeah, because for the pun story, you need a groan.
But it's a lot of fun, you know, and it's just a way of saying, look, we have these traditions and we can play with them. We can be free, we can be creative, and we can but still have the basis of something that gives us cultural connectivity, right?
Yeah.
Because
apparently
all of a sudden
it works. Apparently.
Yeah, because the audience, people coming from disparate backgrounds and stuff, but all of a sudden there was, here's this thing that we all have in common, and we can all laugh and play with it.
Exactly.
Amazing. I just now in the book you describe how you kind of take on that issue in terms of kind of brainstorming for a word that might be and a character that might be doable. I mean, how did you find the pair?
Well, it's interesting that the pear story happened. This was our first pun story. We've done a number of these, but this was the first one. And the idea came when we were driving to a gig because, ideas come when you're thinking in stories. And we were like, what would happen if we changed? How we started is like, what if you changed one letter? I mean, that was the initial thing for us. And so we changed the P to the B to a P. The B to a P. The B to a P, right? And then we said, okay, so then we just brainstormed back and forth. So what would happen? And and actually we write out that interaction in the book. It so happens, but that was the process. So we were like, wow, this could work. And so we started writing immediately, and then it became a writing process. And now I have a whole process that I use when I draft these, when I create them. But it starts with like brainstorming, unfettered, just let it come at you, brainstorming. When we started the 3 pairs, when we began it, we said, okay, we just want to see what would happen. We want to tell the 3 bears so that it's completely recognizable, so that people can really connect to it, and so that all they have to deal with is the wordplay. And we're not going to change anything significant. That was the plan when we went in. And we had no idea that the ending was going to change. We had no plan of that. That evolved in the creative process. We didn't know Goldilocks would be a pear, an apple when we started. Like we just had no clue what she was going to be. We were worried about all the pear stuff. So it evolved in the process, and that's what makes them so much fun to write. Because you just don't know where you're going to go. You know your starting place, and then you just end up. There are some quotes out there where, and I can't remember which is the writer who talks about it's not you don't have to see further than just the headlights in front of the car. You'll eventually get somewhere. Just watch that. I mean, and that's where you start a journey. You're not at the end of the journey, but you start here, and then you just see what comes along the way. And I'm sorry I don't remember the writer, but there is a writer who said something like
But
that.
that's the process of creating any story,
it's lovely.
isn't it? I mean, you have an idea, but you can only see so much of it, and it's when you get into it that you start to say, oh, okay, yeah, there's the next step. Now let's aim for that one. We're in the middle of working on a story right now, and we're in that process with it of, okay, I see that next step. Right? It's not where we're going to end up, but I see that. Now let's. It's a little by little.
But a lot of times with the word plays, there's a lot of jigsaw puzzling. That's how I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, here's another word that has pear in it, and then now how can we stick that in?
And can you stick that in? That's the other thing. Right, exactly.
Break it.
There's always an editing process. A lot of times where you'll try to throw everything in, and then you realize, okay, well, not all of these are actually necessary, and then you pull out the ones that don't really make sense in the situation. And then the thing that Jerry does so well is she has a list in her head of ones that aren't in it that she'll just throw in randomly, and I never know when she's going to do it. She threw a couple of this time.
I did it today.
But ones that are not always in it, but that she just kind of throws in. And we've had times where we'll have a particular audience member. I was waiting for Joe to do it because he's his kind of guy that just gets ideas and throws them out in the middle of the story, and then we learn a new one.
I was paying attention to you. I'm on an awe kick with you guys. I really think this was something else, and I find it really intriguing that you take a very traditional folk story, and then, as you say, twist it or reinvent it. And on one hand, there's some confidence in that because the plot line kind of works, and then the twists are ingenious and surprises for people, and that kind of builds the rapport with the audience, which is really what you're trying to do. So that's a great piece of work, I'll tell you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I did get where you would go. You saw me.
I know.
That's great.
The au pair.
That's terrific.
We absolutely love it. But all right, so here's a storytelling writing, like not a secret, but like a thing, because as we were going through the story, Kate, you guys couldn't see, but Kate she guessed that Golden Delicious was going to be the au pair, and maybe some of you did as well, and so she was all excited. So she got to the end before we got there, and so she was like getting with us, but we still had to give yet another thing so that we could give her the satisfaction of some surprise. You know what I'm saying? And that's why we appended the other ending as well. We could have just ended, she became the au pair, but with people guessing it, we wanted to still give them a nugget of their own. So that's why we did we twist again and hit the apple thing.
Coming up with that ending, which was not twisted at all.
No.
It was...
Yeah.
And because I'm going, it just goes to prove, and my mind is going, where's the pear? There is no pear in the moral.
Yep.
Exactly. But your mind goes. I mean, and that's the thing, is that people start like doing that and getting all about the words, and so it's really.
So do you remember when you got the moral and then she became an apple? And then baby
No, I think
bear.
she
So,
started out as
started
an
out as an apple, and
Oh.
we realized
It was-
that, oh gosh, we could tie that on. You know?
Right, because the thing was is that we were considering having her be a Bartlett apple because those are like golden.
Yeah.
And or
Bartlett
some
pear.
Bartlett
right,
pear.
a Bartlett pear, right? But that's what I meant, a Bartlett pear. Yeah, but you know, but that was a consideration, and we played with that because it would have been perfect. But most people are not pear nerds.
Right.
Like a pear is a pear,
Right.
or like what if people are familiar with canned pears? They're not going to know what the skin. You know, what I mean, so you know, it's like
Pear nerds.
Well, but like, you
But
know-
everybody knows Golden Delicious too.
right, people know Golden Delicious, but they
It's
do they
right
know-
in your face. I mean,
And everybody-
they didn't know.
Most people would do the Bosque thing too.
Well, the Bosque, maybe people would get that, you know, and so that one, like, you know, it's like when it comes to groans, like, not everybody groans over the Bosque, but if we say she was a Bartlett, like, I think we would not only not get groans, but people would groan and say, okay, this is weird.
What
You
the
know,
heck is
like,
that?
what is a Bartlett? You know, so that was why we were like, okay, so that's not going to work. But we said, all right, we're not stopping. We're going to keep trying to press on and see
Yeah,
what we can
yeah,
find.
right.
So that's what happened. So golden, that's where the fruit
You
came.
press on, you make cider. Oh, I got 3 groans.
Well, but you know, actually, we've had cider in the 3 pairs, and like she went inside her, you know, like somehow that.
She went inside her own house.
Yeah. Somehow we had that in there
We could
once.
do that.
Yeah, well, let's put it back,
She ran out of the house and she went back inside her own house.
back
Inside her own house.
Inside
That's
her
good.
own house, exactly.
Ooh, that's good.
Okay.
You know how you can take one word and just beat it to death. That's the way this
Okay. But now we need to go to the coming events.
Sure.
And Joe, pray tell, who is going to be at the first Monday in May at
Margaret
Moon
French.
and River?
Margaret French.
Oh, Margaret
Margaret's
French.
coming down.
Oh.
What's Moon and River?
Moon and River is my open mic with, it used to be at Arthur's, and Arthur's got sold. Arthur's is a little coffee house grocery store in the Stockade part of Schenectady.
Got you.
So the Moon and River was owned by the same guy that managed Arthur's. So I've just kind of moved it down the street and changed the date. And it's a little funky, but it's a nice place to gather. And
Well, you'd been there before.
we've been there before we went to Arthur's.
Yes, storytelling, music, and spoken word. So it's a little more open
That's nice.
than the open mic up in Saratoga Springs,
Yeah.
which is
That's great.
storytelling, no notes.
And
Gotcha.
we've got an interesting mix of folks. There's the Story Circle folks who come, and there's some musicians who show up. There's a writers group that meets in the Stockade. There's about 12 of them, and they'll come in and bring some of their work. There's a fellow who plays the violin and the banjo, and he'll show up with one or the other and things like that. So
Very nice.
it's not very big, but it's fun.
And does she have a topic or?
It's May's Days, stories of May's Days,
Like May the month.
May the month.
These days. Stories. Okay. And then we have the Interfaith Story Circle will be having stories of the mystics from many different religious traditions. Wednesday, May 15th at the Hindu Temple Society on Albany Shaker Road. Not too far from where we are, actually.
They call it, right?
We passed it on the way over, in fact,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Because we came
Yeah, we
across
came to
Albany
Albany
Shaker
Shaker Road, but we
It's
saw
not
it.
every day
Okay.
you drive by a Hindu temple.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Unless you live
And as always, their events are free and open to the public. Then on Tuesday, May 21st, we'll be right here in the Colonie Town Library. And for our monthly meeting where people share works in progress and can get as much or as little feedback on them as they want and as they're comfortable with. I found that the feedback that I get is very informative, and I'm not married to a storyteller, so I have to go elsewhere.
And Kate and I are married, but not to each other.
Yes.
Exactly.
I have nothing to say about
I
it.
was, just thought I'd throw that one in there. I I didn't have a pair to talk about.
But you guys are a pair.
Very good. There you go.
Yeah. And then on the fourth Tuesday of the month, there is, and in May, that's the 28th, there's the storytelling open mic up at Cafe Lena. The feature teller is our friend, Fran Yardley.
Oh, yes, Fran.
And she is going to be sharing some stories from her recently published book, Finding True North, which is a book. For years, she and her first husband renovated the Bartlett Carey Hotel.
Bartlett Carey Club.
Club, that's right, thank you. And so that started her diving into the history of that, and then she went to the area, going back as far as, into the early 1800s, and 13 years, I think, she spent on developing this book. And it is a finalist for the 1918 Forward Indies Book of the Year Award in the regional category.
Lovely.
Oh, yeah, it says here Bartlett Carey Club. Duh. Anyways, so she's going to be up there, and then it's a wonderful place. Their full cafe menu is available to us, so we're a real gig for them. Modest price, $5, students free, no discount for seniors, but $5 is like what?
But they do have an elevator.
They do have an elevator, right? And new tellers are always welcome. Then I'd like to go on to our season and then ask about you. Story Circle at Proctor's is proud to announce our 13th season at Proctor's, the 2019 to 2020 season. We will have 5 word plays September through March, and the topics are hope, turning points, kindness, sticky situations, and lemons to lemonade. And then Celebration will be on Sunday, November 17th, and the topic is mountains.
Mountains.
And some will be actual, I assume, and some will be metaphorical. And then, if you can't find anything on your television or Netflix or whatever you subscribe to, you can go to our website, storycircleatproctors.org, and click on YouTube. And you will have over 200 stories on demand. And you can also find episodes from this show if you click on Story by Story.
You could find that story about the pear.
Yeah.
The pear family.
It'll be
That'll
there.
be there.
But you folks have coming up this summer a gig that you help produce.
Oh yeah, there's the Clearwater Festival, which is the festival that, amongst other things, is a big fundraiser for Pete Seeger's organization, the Clearwater Environmental and Educational Organization, with the boat on the river and so forth. And it's a huge folk festival that happens Father's Day weekend down in Westchester County in Croton Park. And they have a storytelling stage at the festival. It's one of the only folk festivals that has a full-time storytelling stage at it as part of the event. It was started years ago by Toshi Seeger, Pete's wife, and Louise Kessel, and they ran it for a number of years and then passed it on to us, and we've been running it now for over 20 years. So it's been a long time. But
we're still teenagers.
There it is. We're
Still teenagers, still young people doing it. Yeah, I understand.
And so every year we run a stage with storytelling that runs for the entire weekend. It's called the Story Grove, and we tell stories at it, and we have guest storytellers from New York and beyond at the festival, as well as several music stages and a dance stage. It's a massive event and really a pretty special one in the Hudson Valley, absolutely. So that runs the Father's Day weekend in June. And then there's another folk festival that we perform at every year called the Falcon Ridge Folk Festival, which is in our own county, in Columbia County in Austerlitz, and that's the first weekend of August. And we are always performing at that one, usually on the family stage, and then sometimes they have us up on the other stages, the workshop stage in particular, telling stories and representing storytelling to the folk festival crowd.
And for most of our viewers, those are very accessible destinations.
Oh, yeah.
Close enough to get there in a reasonable period of time.
Oh, absolutely.
And loaded with a diverse and high-quality talent pool. That's just wonderful things.
Yeah, it's amazing what goes on at those festivals in
Yes.
terms of the types of performers and the array of stuff that's there to
And they're
be seen and
family
experienced.
friendly,
Oh, absolutely.
and environmentally conscious, and just wonderful ways of spending summer weekends.
And you also are doing gigs at libraries, et cetera, which you can see on this slide.
We have a lot of libraries that we do in the summertime. That's one of the main things that we run around and perform as part of their summer reading programs, and this summer's no exception. In fact, it's a fairly busy summer that we have this year, on the theme of outer space, which is interesting for folk tales.
Outer space. It's hard to find a pair up there. I finally got
But
into
there's
it.
something that can star in their stories.
Right.
Have a stellar experience.
Boy, you are.
Constellation of choices that we have.
I'll tell you, I've never felt this inadequate in my life on these three. Boy, they're out in front. I'll tell you.
Feeling like you're sucked into a black hole, are you?
Okay. So we have 12 minutes left. I mean, yes, it's hard to believe. We've gone through 46 minutes already. So we'd like another story, please.
Well,
Well,
go ahead.
the one we were thinking of was probably too long.
Well, I think if you're up for it, and I think we could probably do it fine. You mentioned it early on.
I mentioned it.
Yeah, you mentioned because you were talking about the book. You were talking about traditional stories that you can do fun things with, and this gives another aspect of what we do. Because you mentioned the tortoise and the hare.
Correct. Oh, because Joe mentioned the tortoise. Right. It did
Right.
come up.
And so let's do our version of the tortoise and the hare, which shows another way of twisting stories, and
Oh, right. And it
it
it's
shows
a
a couple
double
of
twist.
yeah, it's a double twist.
It's a double
so
twist.
that's kind of fun too to see different ways that we can update stories. So one thing that we do is that we do rap music versions of stories, and Tortoise and the Hare is one of the stories that I pulled my drum out here in case you couldn't see it on the camera, but it sits down below where you're going to see it, so you're just going to see me moving my arms. But so this is the Tortoise and the Hare, and
The thing that we usually talk about when we do a rap story is the tradition of rap music, hip hop, where it came from. We think of, like, nowadays we think of it as a modern version of ancient forms of storytelling, because if you trace the roots of rap, which we've done, modern rap as we think about it now starts in the Bronx of New York, where it was a music and an art of social protest. Things are wrong, things are unfair, and we are going to use this art form to express it. And so a lot of marginalized communities take on with it because it's a way of artfully making statements, but it's spread from the Bronx, and it's gone, and obviously it's a worldwide transnational art form. But if you trace the roots from the Bronx, those verbal and musical forms were influenced by oral storytelling forms from Jamaica, probably from Trinidad, and they were also influenced by forms from Western Africa, where traditional stories are told in rhyme to rhythmic beats. So we see it as a modern form of ancient storytelling traditions as well. So we like to give that backdrop. Anyway, so got to give credit to the people who developed it, African American communities. So yeah.
All right, so you already know what story we're going to do, which doesn't matter because you'll see how we twist it as we go through it.
Do I start this one?
You start this one. Oh, we didn't practice this one because we didn't know we were going to do it, so if we mess it up, there you go.
This is live.
That's right. This is
It's live.
Live
But the other thing
performance.
that it is it's coming out of our conversation, and we like to jump in and, this story came up, and let's just go with it.
It's a long time ago in a faraway place.
So,
That's it.
long time ago in a faraway place, two famous creatures decided decided to race.
One was the tortoise,
He was the green one,
the other was the hare.
and he was the mean one.
When Hare saw Tortoise walking from the east to the west, Hare would say,
Are you still walking, or did you stop for a rest?
Tortoise liked to make egg soufflés from scratch, Hare would say.
Will you be done before the eggies hatch?
See, Tortoise liked to take things easy and slow, but Hare was always on the go, go, go.
Tortoise admired views. He would smell the flowers. He would read. He would paint and meditate for hours. Tortoise baked his bread and he made his own clothes.
But Hare had no time for activities like those. He liked life in the fast lane on the jump, no doubt. He used a laundry service, went to the gym, and ate out.
And in between his meetings, Hare managed to find a minute to make fun of the green shell and the tortoise that was in it.
Hare's insults were sharp. He was always attacking.
You're a slug. You're a sloth. You're the sultan of slack and tortoise. You are slower than a snail stuck in slime. Yo, you are the king of wasting time.
Now, the tortoise's shell was thick, but the hare was on his case. He'd had about enough. Hare, it's time for a race.
So the day for the race between our heroes was set.
Hare said,
That's a day Tortoise will regret.
On your mark, get ready, get set, and go.
Hare zipped away.
Tortoise went with the flow.
Hare looked around. He was ahead all right, so he sang a little song that was not so polite.
He sang, nya, 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 nya. You guys want to do that with us? Nya, 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 nya.
Oh, how are you ever gonna get any place? Moving as you do at tortoise pace.
Yeah, moving as you do
At tortoise pace.
Hare looked around. Tortoise was so far back, Hare said.
I can do some work. I got plenty of slack.
Hare slowed to a
If
jog,
this race don't beat all,
pulled out his cell phone, and made a conference call.
He was so caught up in talking that he went off the cement.
Then he had himself a little accident. He bumped into a tree, then he felt a bit ill, then he heard Tortoise catching up.
This is no time to chill.
Hare held on to his lead.
Yeah, I'm doing all right.
So he sang the little song that was not so polite. He sang, nya, 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 nya.
I'll leave you in the dust without a trace. You'll go home in disgrace at tortoise pace.
Go home in disgrace
At tortoise pace.
Hare looked around. Tortoise was so far behind, Hare said.
Time for me to go online.
Hare pulled out a palm-sized computer apparatus. He surfed and tweeted and posted his status.
He was checking a chat room when he heard a little cough.
Tortoise passed him by.
Hare didn't even log off. He went hip hip hopping at a frightening speed, and in no time at all, he was back in the lead.
Hare was moving so fast he nearly took flight, so he sang the little song that was not so polite. He sang, nya, 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 nya.
Oh, you're wasting my time. You call this a race. You go home in disgrace
At tortoise pace, you go home in disgrace.
At tortoise pace.
Hare passed a house. He noticed that inside there was a television on.
Well, his eyes opened
He
wide.
was locked in place in a couch potato stance. He was stuck in a TV trance.
He was still as a statue, eyes glued to the screen. His mouth hung to his knees. It was an ugly scene.
Hare would have sprouted some roots if it hadn't been for hearing all the spectators hooting and shouting and cheering.
Well, he looked up and was shocked to see
That the tortoise had
this
won.
can't be happening to me.
Hare took off in a flash.
It was yesterday's news.
Tortoise won some gold medals and was giving interviews.
Hare's ears flopped down.
Then he had a cosmic shift.
I guess I'm not too swift.
Hare took Tortoise out to eat some bouillabaisse. Then he walked Tortoise home at tortoise pace. Yeah, he walked Tortoise home at tortoise pace.
After the race, Hare and Tortoise understood that many different paces make the world good.
So the next time somebody says you're too slow,
Or too young,
or too old,
or too high,
or too low,
tell them let others go at their own pace, and then everyone will win
in the human race.
Bravo. Bravo.
And you have aptly illustrated why you are in the circle of excellence in the National Storytelling Network.
Oh, thank you very much.
And you tied together all of the points you made in the earlier conversation.
There you go.
That's art, isn't it?
Yes, and we have 5 minutes to go.
How did you do that?
Too much, too little.
Well, one thing that we talk about in that, because we did 2 things, right? Barry said that we...
Oh, don't turn off your televisions, by the way. We're not telling you to turn off your televisions right now.
No.
It's just
Yeah.
There's
Television.
Get back in the race, right?
But we talk about, like, like is that in that situation, because we talk about the different ways that we can take a story and flip it, or work with it. Like, and in this situation, we do two twists to it. The one twist is we go from prose to rhyme. Prose meaning not rhymed language, and so we go from prose to rhyme. And then the other thing that we do is we update it. We take a look at modern society and then make shifts. And in fact, you want a secret?
Yes.
Okay, here's a secret. So
we're on TV, so it won't be a real secret.
Oh, I know. I know.
Now she'll whisper, turn the microphones off now.
Or turn your... No.
Talk about good television.
Yeah. Mimes often aren't TV, yes.
But here's a secret. So Barry told you that, like, we did that off the cuff, right? Like and so forth. Now, this is a piece that we're ever updating because it's about modern stuff. We made a change recently, and a lot of those changes are mine to say, but on the cuff, without a review beforehand, I revert to earlier language. But we're ever changing what we're talking about. It didn't used to be a computer apparatus when we wrote the song. What was it? It was like a
PDA, like a handheld palm device.
It was a palm thing, right? Like so, but that was how long ago we wrote it. So now it's a computer apparatus because it's going to just cover us for a long time. It's not a brand name. It's not, it's not. We're not calling it up, whatever, all those things. So that's one of the tricks. So when you update, it has a limited life. So you have to keep aware of how you have to keep shifting it,
or it will be stale.
Exactly.
And some people will be so young they will have no clue what a PDA is.
Right. Exactly.
They mean pad, they're spelling it wrong.
Exactly. Right. So you have to, be willing to keep changing it up. But the trick is with something memorized is that it gets into the grooves. It took us a while to get the apparatus right on our tongues, but these other changes that we're working on are still they're still evolving. We have so many stories that we tell. We don't get to tell this enough to dig it in. So that's a tiny trick, but a thing. So there was the little secret. It's an error you guys would never know, but it would be a reason to practice. But the thing about stories, and the best thing is to be able to tell the right story for the right time.
Right.
And that's much more important than because you started this whole thing, Joe, talking about the intention of story.
Right.
And the intention of story has to do with why you're telling the story and what the story is meaning. And we don't want to impose something on a moment that doesn't belong. Whether if it's a time limit or if it's not fitting in with the flow. You don't want to toss a rock in. You want to sail on the flow. And so you've got to choose the right story at the moment. Our friend was talking about she's a real concert goer and talking about people going in with set lists. And we said we kind of go in with the anti-set list, the list of what we did last time and that we shouldn't do this time.
But what we unfortunately have to do is say goodbye now.
Oh, really?
Because we're ticking off to our last 45 seconds.
Got you.
Well, this has been the most enjoyable and actually entertaining and interesting because I've learned some things that I hadn't the appreciation for, and I've been encouraged to maybe fool around with some folk stories and see where I might take them, and I hope our listeners or viewers have too.
I imagine you'd do a good job with that.
I could work on it, Barry. I will.
I think you would.
I think you do it.
So thank you, listeners, very much for staying with us this whole episode, and we hope you'll come back again to Story by Story.
Much good cheer.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning